Hi, welcome to Chef Richard's Kitchen. I'm Chef Richard Miller. Today we're going to make one of the easiest meals or stews to make. Now, I didn't say quick and easy because it does take a little while to cook, but it's one of the easiest recipes you can ever think of. It's called football stew. And I remember when I was a kid, my mother used to make this. And I think the reason that it got its name was because on days when there were football games on the weekends and things like that, I think what they did was they put this all in a roasting pan. They didn't have crock pots back then. They put it all in a roasting pan and they put it in the oven and they stuck it in there at 275 degrees for about 5 hours. And I think that when the game was over, the stew was ready. So, can you go out and find something on the internet that gives a better description of its origin? Probably. But anyway, this is what I remember. This was comfort food when I was a kid. And I think another reason is probably because while this was in the oven baking, that gave Mom an extra 5 hours. She could chase my brother and I around to make sure that we weren't getting in trouble. I didn't say that, of course. So let's start out. I'm going to use just a crock pot. And this is a perfect meal to use crock pot for. We used to put it, and I've done it in a Dutch oven. I put it in the oven, and just let it bake, most of the afternoon. And it comes out fine, But there's a lot of times when you don't want to leave somewhere and have the stove running or the oven running, where a crock pot is a much surer thing, a much safer thing. It's designed for that. Throw it in there. All right? It works just fine. The ingredients are fairly simple. The worst part of making this entire dish is cutting it all up. And you have to take your ingredients, and we're going to use stew beef. I mean the cheap stew beef, because it's going to be cooking a long, long time. So however tough it is, it'll be fine when it comes out. You want to start out with a couple pounds of stew beef. I used about 4 stalks of celery that are cut up, 3 russet potatoes that I cut up. These are just one of the small bags of the baby cut carrots, cut in half. And then that was probably more of a large onion. I've usually used medium. That was more of a large. That's okay too. But it's the meat, celery, potatoes, carrots, and onions. And those you chop about an inch. Just about an inch cubes or inch squares or whatnot. And the reason for that is, remember, you always think of your guest. The last thing you want is your guest pulling out this big long piece of celery or a big chunk of meat or something and asking you, by the way, do you have a steak knife that I can cut this? No, it's a stew. You want to make sure they can eat it with a spoon or a fork or whatever without having to cut it up. You're the one that should be the one cutting it up. So, okay, let's get started. The first thing I did was I took the crock pot and I sprayed the bowl inside with the nonstick vegetable spray. I use that a lot, and it sure saves a lot of time on cleanup. So, first thing let's do is let's put in our ingredients. I usually put plastic over the potatoes, especially when I'm cutting them up and I'm going to be filming a little bit later, because potatoes can be like apples or anything else. They oxidize and turn brown. Does that hurt them any? No. Does it make them a little less appetizing? Oh yeah. So let's go ahead and take probably about half our potatoes and put them in. Half our carrots. half our celery. Half our stew beef. Onions. Now start over. Potatoes. Now I'm going to put the meat in next because I really don't want the meat on the top or on the bottom. So that in next. Carrots, celery, and the rest of the onion. Pretty simple thus far, wasn't it? Let me wash my hands, and we'll get to making the sauce for the top. Okay, for the sauce, we're going to start out, normally I use 3 of these little 10.5-ounce cans of just tomato soup, tomato soup concentrate. This time I'm using one of the bigger ones and one of the little ones. What you want is you want about 30 to 31 ounces worth. So we're going to pour that in our bowl. And to that, we're going to add about 1.5 tablespoons of tapioca, something you don't hear all the time mentioned. What this is going to be used for is tapioca is often used as a thickener, so that this will be it won't be so thin, and when you pull it out of your stew, it'll be thickened a little, yet not a whole lot either. You don't want it in globs, you want it just kind of a sauce. A couple of tablespoons of sugar, and a teaspoon of salt. And I'm just going to put a little bit in there. Remember what I always say about salt. You can always take and put more in it if you want. Sure as hell can't take it out. So, oops, I didn't say that on the camera, did I? All right. Stir this all together. I'm going to leave it right here. I'm going to leave the rest of the salt out. There's no reason to put it in. Remember, unless you're using, one of the reduced sodium tomato soup, there's going to be plenty of salt in that. So I think it tastes fantastic just the way it is. So let's go ahead and we're just going to put this right over the top. Spread it out. Now when this heats and cooks, this is going to drain down on top of the rest of your ingredients. Okay, that's all there is. Let's go ahead and let's just set our lid on. I'm going to turn it to high, because we want to get it started after probably an hour or so, I'm going to come down, turn it to low, and we're going to let it sit this way for probably an extra 5 hours. Something like that. So that's it. This is probably one of the easiest recipes you'll ever do. So I certainly hope you give this one a try. As always, I'll put the ingredient list up, and I'll see you in about 6 hours. No, I definitely cut the film for this. See you in about 6 hours. Bye. Okay, welcome back. It's been about 6 hours, and it looks like everything's done, and it's done very well. So let's go ahead and let's take and see how we did. All right, we look in here. The carrots are nice and tender. So are the potatoes. The beef is well done. So is the celery. So it looks like everything's done very, very well. Let's take a final taste and see how it tastes. Very good. You can taste the tomato soup. You can taste the taste the beef. You can taste the carrot, the celery a little bit. Mostly what you're tasting is the tomato soup and the beef, which comes out very, very good. So anyway, here we are. Let's add a little bit of garnish here. And once again, if somebody asks you for crackers or something like that, I would suggest oyster crackers, just mainly because unlike saltines, they're a lot cleaner and a lot easier to handle. So anyway, give this a try, and please, if you do, remember to send me a comment or an email or something like that. I'm always looking to hear how people do on some of these recipes, you know, how it turns out, how we can make this better. So once again, thank you very, very much for joining me on this episode. Take care. God bless. Remember that cooking should always, always be fun, and it is. And we'll see you next episode. Bye for now.